Hello, Greg.
Hello, Lilou. It is so good to see you today. I am so happy to be with you and my French family. This is unrehearsed and synchronous. I'm going to follow your lead in this dance wherever it goes.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's such a pleasure to do an interview with you today, and we'll be sharing this interview in French and in English all around the world because your knowledge is particularly interesting right now because you have studied for how many decades?
You know, this is the 38th year that I'm offering this material, but I was doing the work even before that, so it's over 4 decades.
Oh, it's a true honor to be interviewing you today. And last time was in London. I was interviewing you, and Nassim Aramain was there, Joe Dispenza, among some of your very good friends that you travel and meet on a regular basis in different sites, extraordinary sites all around the world. And you live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, right?
I am broadcasting today from a studio just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It is the high desert, the cool, thin air of late autumn in the high desert. And you know, when we were in London just over a year ago, I think we all took for granted the freedoms of being able to gather together in a large conference physically in the presence of one another. And I'm appreciating those times even more right now. But I have to tell you, Lilou, something's very interesting because we have moved to the online streaming and the digital models. I think what we're beginning to understand is that we are more than the photons in the screen of a computer. I'm seeing your photons, you're seeing mine, but we obviously are feeling a connection, and that connection is more than just the pluses and the minuses on the screen. I think this lockdown is teaching us that we are connected and that we can feel the deep love of that connection even when we are no longer able to meet physically. And I'm an optimist. I believe we will be meeting. I'm also a realist. And realistically, we're going through a huge, pivotal, monumental shift in the way we think and the way we live. And when we come out of that shift, I think we will appreciate our connection on an even deeper level.
Yes,
Yeah.
this sharing this information right now is precious, and I know you have some word of wisdom and from our ancestors because you have studied them, and you live on a holy land, let's say in New Mexico, where actually I started many years ago, 10 years ago or so, the Juicy Living Tour, and I started my interviews there, and I met many special people, including the Hopis, and I mean,
Yeah.
you have studied them, and I'm holding this very precious book called Les Codes de Sagesse in French, which is, I guess, the wisdom codes in English.
Yes, the wisdom codes.
Yeah, and I find that's very powerful because right now in France we're very much in tune with understanding that these codes are activating things in ourselves that have not yet experienced life in such a way, and I'm very passionate about this topic and hearing your research because you have studied for many years the ancestors and bridging it with our current, actually bringing solutions from the ancestors that are totally applicable these days. And these codes, these sacred texts, these words of wisdom taught all around the world in different cultures and at different times in life are powerful. And I wonder how you see this book and why this book is written right now, in these times of crisis. How precious is this?
Well, thank you for your kind words. And it's the first time I've seen my book in French. May I see the cover? Okay, here it is in English.
Cool.
So they use the same cover, but just the translation. So Lilou, when I wrote this book, I had no way of knowing that the world would be in a global pandemic or in the lockdown. Specifically, I did sense that we were entering into a time of opportunity and a time of challenge, both at the same time. And I wanted to share a book that was not so technical, that was not so scientific. I am a scientist. I'm an earth scientist with a strong background in the life sciences, marine biology, cellular biology, molecular chemistry. But I didn't want this book to be about those things. You mentioned the length of time that I've been doing this work, much of my adult life. As a scientist, I have had the opportunity to travel to the most ancient and remote and isolated and mysterious and pristine places remaining on the earth, from the monasteries of Tibet on the Chinese plateau into India and Nepal and all through the Andes Mountains of southern Peru and the Yucatan in Mexico and the Aboriginal traditions and the Bedouin traditions in Egypt and more, and the American desert Southwest where I live. And as different as the cultures have been that I have studied with, there's a common theme, Lilou, that ties them together. And that theme is what this book is all about. It tells us that our ancestors have always used words in times of need. They've always turned to specific words or brief phrases, and they have been preserved in our prayers, in our chants, in our mantras, in our hymns. They are preserved on the walls of our most ancient temples and our most cherished texts, and the oral traditions that go from father to son and from mother to daughter. And my thinking was, if the words have worked for our ancestors for over 5,000 years in their time of need, that those words will work for us as well. So that was my thinking. The scientists have only recently begun to discover the power of the words. And I'm just going to read the opening of my book. I'm writing a quote from a neuroscientist. His name is Andrew Newberg. And listen to what he says. He says, a single word has the power to influence the expression of genes that regulate physical and emotional stress. He's saying just the power of the word itself can change the actual biology of our bodies. And I began to explore what this means. And the bottom line, and I know my dear brother Joe Dispenza talks about the power of neurons that wire together and how they fire together. So what the science now is telling us is the words that we use every day in our lives not only determine, Lilou, how we think about ourselves and our world, but the words determine what we are even capable of thinking about, what we can even conceive when it comes to solving our problems. So with those ideas in mind, I have collected the mudras and the chants and the mantras from my travels for many years. I should have called this book one because there are so many.
Yeah.
I had to select. And what I did was I categorized according to human experience. Experiences, there's a chapter on fear. There's a chapter on protection. There's a chapter on love. There's a chapter on loss. Because these are universal experiences and we all need some kind of strength and support when we have these experiences. And these words have the ability to give us those things. So I didn't want to only use one tradition. So I went to the Hindu, the Vedas, the oldest, some of the oldest written texts, the Vedas, 7,000 years before present. I went to the Buddhist traditions. I went into the temple walls in Egypt and the tomb walls and the texts that tell us what happens to a soul when the body.
Yeah, that was interesting for me to read, is that you were talking about your experience of the pyramids and how in Hunas and how they're already talking there about their emotions and how to deal with those emotions. Tell us about that.
Well, with this is ancient Egypt, and Egypt was the first indigenous and ancient culture I had the opportunity to explore back in the 1980s. It was much easier to travel and go to these places. And in what are called the pyramid texts, and the Pyramid of Unas is one of the best preserved records. You walk into a room under the surface of the earth, and the texts are from the floor to the ceiling, inscribed into the rock in a way so beautiful. It looks like the artist left yesterday. They've been protected over the years. And what these texts are telling the soul, the person, the initiate, would begin to study these texts while they were alive, so that when they left this world, when they were passing, the text would already be familiar. And the bottom line, the theme to the text, is that the soul was never born, so the soul can never die. The soul cannot be destroyed because the soul was never created. It is eternal essence of energy changing form. And the texts describe to the initiate what to expect and the emotions to embrace the transition, not to fight it, but to embrace it. And it's a very, very interesting tradition. And the reason I chose this is because it paralleled the Hindu text and the Buddhist text. They all say the soul cannot die. We cannot die. So when we lose our loved ones, whether they are humans or our animal loved ones or whoever it is, I've lost friends recently. And even though my heart knows that they still exist, intellectually, the question for me is, where did they just go? How, this deep mystery, how can a human be breathing and consciously interacting with me in one moment, and in another moment, all of that ends? What happened? Where did they go? And it parallels the mystery that happens on the other end at birth. Science, this is still a mystery, Lilou. Scientists tell us, first of all, the first organ that forms in your body and my body in our mother's womb, it's not the brain, it's the heart. Yeah, and so here's the mystery. In one moment, the heart is just this mass of cells, motionless but functioning, and in the next moment, some mystery occurs and the heart begins to beat. And scientists, they really don't know why that happens. They attribute it to ion potentials across cell walls and all of that. But the indigenous people, almost universally, from my time in the Himalayas and the Andes Mountains and the jungles of the Yucatan, they all have the same story. They say that the moment our heart begins that first mysterious beat is the moment the soul enters into the body. And when the heart stops the beating is when the soul leaves the body. And this is what these texts begin to tell us. So when we're looking for comfort and we say, where did my mother go that just left this world? Or my partner, my husband, or my wife, my father, I lost my father long ago. And, where did he go? And it's not science, but it's something that is meaningful to the human spirit to hear the words that have comforted for millennia, and it triggers something within us. And what it begins to trigger is the way we think determines how the neurons begin to send out the dendrites and begin to connect together. And we begin to build a neural network reflecting the understandings from these ancient texts, and it changes the way that we think.
So how does those texts, like the ones that you're referring to, actually to go through these the loss of a dear one, or those protection texts, or to feel our power, and how does the soul respond to those sounds? Because you refer to this experience where you were in the Himalayas and actually ask these people in prayer, how does it feel in your body? So I'm interested in the link between the body and how it feels when it's in intense prayers and reciting and repeating those mantras, and the soul. What does it do to the soul hearing that?
Sure. Well, you asked me 3 questions right there.
Typical.
I know. So, and I'm going to answer all 3 of them. So when I was my first journey into the highlands of central China and the monasteries of Tibet, with a translator, I was with the abbot of a monastery, the overseer of the monastery. And he was an older man. And I was asking him, I said, when we see your prayers on the outside, what's happening inside your body? So when we think of Tibetan prayers, we think of the chant, whoa, no, 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 no. And we think of the mudras and the mantras and the bells and the bowls and the chimes and the incense. We think of all of that. And so I said, when we see all those things, and we see your prayers on the outside, I was interested, what's happening inside? And the man, through the translator, he said to me, you have never seen our prayers, because a prayer cannot be seen. He said, what you see are the things that we do to create the feeling inside of our bodies. The feeling is the prayer. The feeling is the prayer. Now, this parallels what science is telling us. We have ceremonies and rituals that are meaningful to us, but this is what's so important. What the abbot said to me was, the words are not the prayer. But in the modern world, we in the West have been taught, if we say the right words at the right time, something is supposed to happen. And when it does not, sometimes we lose trust and we lose faith. But the words, it's not the words, it's the feeling, the very human experience that has been discounted by the patriarchy, by the male-dominated patriarchy through the ages. The power of human emotion is really where our highest levels of mastery and our deepest levels of power. Women typically are more attuned, not always, but typically are more attuned to their emotions because of their relationship with children and childbirth, their relationship with nature. And men, as warriors, it was believed that a man could not be an effective warrior if he was empathizing with his enemy. So his emotions, walk a mile in your enemy's shoes. That doesn't work on the battlefield. So now I personally have found that is not true. I'm a warrior. I've studied martial arts all of my life, and I've studied human emotion all of my life. I'm a double Cancerian male. So Cancerians are all about the power of emotion. And I think emotion is our greatest tool to help us navigate with a different kind of warfare. It doesn't have to be hand-to-hand combat. And in the emotional judo and the emotional kung fu, through the power of our emotions, we often can disarm a potentially violent situation through the understanding of our emotions. And that's a powerful form of warfare. So without anyone actually being hurt. So it's interesting. You ask about the soul. The soul is.
Does it tune in? Does it tune in?
Well, the soul can be influenced. What the texts tell us is that there's this very interesting relationship between the soul and the body. They cohabit, and the body is a vehicle. They are united in some respects, but the soul is not influenced by those emotions to the degree that the body is. So this is more about bringing the vehicle, the body, into an alignment to free the soul to its deepest and truest levels of expression. So here's what the science tells us. For every emotion, every experience we've ever had, from the lightest of the light and the greatest ecstasy to the depths of our hurt and our suffering and our loss, every experience creates a chemical in our bodies. The chemicals are called neuropeptides. And those chemicals, when they are created, they are the chemical equivalent of our emotions. So we have, ecstatic neuropeptides, and we have suffering neuropeptides. They want to metabolize through our bodies. And in joy and ecstasy, usually is no problem. They metabolize through perspiration and breath and tears and so on. When we are in trauma, the trauma locks down the energy of those neuropeptides. It doesn't allow them to metabolize until we resolve the trauma. The words help us feel differently about our experience. And when we feel differently, we are resolving, we're not stuck, we are resolving that trauma. And in the resolution, those neuropeptides are able to move freely and metabolize through the body. It's when those neuropeptides are stuck in the, this is so interesting. We tend subconsciously, I'm not saying we do this consciously, but we tend to store the neuropeptides in the organs and the tissues and the glands that we associate with the trauma.
Hence the Taoists have a sound for each organ to liberate the trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different ways. When something is true, you will see it in many, many different aspects. You'll see it in many ways. And the Taoists are very, Oriental medicine is based on this. There are a lot of modern therapies that are based on this. Shamanism in Kurandara is based on
I was
on
going to
this
say, in shamanism, having met Sangra Ingerman, that I love, that is not too far from where you live.
She's my dear friend, my neighbor, just north of where I am.
So special, and she's this beautiful shaman, and she explained to me how defragmented, how our soul, once they get real big trauma, snaps out, gets out, and basically when she does her shamanic work, she brings it back together in the body of the person that can re-experience it. So so how is it related to this, the codes of wisdom? Because these mantras that we recite basically bring back the soul together that could have been fragmented at a certain time.
It all comes down to our feelings and our emotions. So in the shamanistic traditions, the shaman is performing rituals and rites and ceremonies for an individual. In the word codes, we're doing this for ourselves. In the word codes, we are tying in to the mantra and the prayer and the hymn and the chant of those who have come before us. And I talk about this in the book. There are techniques of how these are used. One of the techniques, for example, is to be in coherence between the heart and the brain. I know many of my colleagues talk about this as well. I've worked with the Institute of Heart Math since the year that they were formed. I'm not their employee, but we are colleagues and we work together. And the power, we are the only form of life, Lilou, we are the only form of life that has the ability to consciously harmonize our heart and our brain, the neurons that we always knew were in the brain, with the neurons that were recently discovered in the heart. So we're talking about two organs, but we harmonize those neurons into one system in our body. No other form of life can do this on demand, at will, consciously, when we choose. And it is our ability to do this that opens the door to this phenomenon that we call self-regulation of our biology. Self-regulation is where we awaken a powerful immune system. Who doesn't want that in a global pandemic? We awaken the longevity enzymes in every cell in the body. And it's not just about living longer, but if you are living longer, it means you are healing, you are regenerating, you are rejuvenating to give you the longevity. Heart-brain harmony, this is what it does. Harmonizing the heart and the brain opens the door to deep resilience in times of extremes that we're living now, to deep states of intuition, so for that inner knowing and so much more. So it is in the state of heart-brain harmony when we create that, and all the instructions are in the book, I give the instructions, then these words and hymns and prayers and mantras become even more potent. So I think they work, they can always help, but they find their greatest potency. And this is what I've found in studying with the indigenous people. This is the Tibetans that I'm with, they create the heart-brain harmony. The shamans, they create, it's through breath, focus, and feeling. Those three things come together to create this harmony. And then in the presence of that harmony, we invoke the word codes, and that is where they are even more potent.
Yeah, it seems that we, in a sort of trance, it seems that at a certain point, by repeating those mantras, those hymns, those sacred words, we bypass our mental state, our subconscious, and we can implant and go beyond that. And this is how it feels to me on an intuitive level, that we reach a deeper level, and then we're really making connection with the divine.
Your intuition is so right on. It is right on. And I know I know you personally. I know you're a deeply intuitive woman. And part of this is where the science of the heart-brain harmony really helps us to understand what we sense intuitively so that we can do more of the things that work and maybe less of the things that don't work so well. So if we try to solve our problems only through the brain, through the mind, and if we try to heal our hurt, our trauma, only through the mind, if we try to ask the deep questions, should I stay in this relationship or should I leave? Should I stay in this job? Should I leave? Should I stay in this city or should I move to the country? I mean, these are questions people are asking. If you answer those questions through your mind, here's what happens. The brain is a polarity organ. So you will always have the left and the right brain. You will always have the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, the success, the failure, the worth, the not worth. This is the power of the human heart. The neural network in the human heart is not a polarity network. The neural network in the heart does not work through the ego loops of the brain. The ego loops is our story, our conditioning, all of the patterns and beliefs of our parents and our society and our culture and our education, our religion. All of that's in the brain. The heart is a complex neural network, the same kinds of neurons. It is not linked. It is not a polarity organ. It's not linked to those ego loops. So when you harmonize the heart and the brain, then you lift yourself out of those ego loops and you receive intuitive answers very quickly, usually really clean answers. The heart is not judgmental. The heart will never judge another person or yourself. Your heart will always tell you what is true for you in the moment. And this is why, in my experience, almost universally, when I'm in the Middle East, the indigenous people, they take a full hand right over the human heart. Or when I'm in the Yucatan with the Maya, right over the heart. The ancient Christians always made a big cross right over the heart. The Buddhists have the prayer mudra, and they hold it. And the Tibetans do this, and the Buddhists do this. Tibetan Buddhists and traditional Buddhists. That little pressure right on your heart, that pressure draws your awareness from your mind to the place where you feel the touch. And this is one of the techniques that has been used successfully for a very long time to help us to focus in our heart. I in the brief conversation we're having now, I'm happy to answer the questions. We cannot answer them as completely. And I want people to know what we're talking about. And if they want more information, it's in our programs. It's in the book as well.
Yes, but so there is a posture in life. So there is. I'm very interested about the again related to this book. Those wording, those sacred words. I understand what you're saying, that it realigns us with the heart and it helps us to make decisions and to flow with life and to be in the flow with life and to contact, to get in touch with our divine power and to let our soul lead the way. But how does these specific words, why are these specific words sacred, and how do they enter in resonance? How does it really work? How to make them work? Because most of us have already sacred texts around us. We're just not using them as you said, we're just reciting or we're just saying them.
It's a great question, and there are two ways that I'm aware of that these texts work. Number one, we've already talked about. The words have meaning, and when we read those words, that meaning changes the way that we feel. And in the presence of that shift, we are changed chemically. Andrew Newberg tells us we are changed genetically. So the meaning of the words themselves, this is where it gets a little tricky with translations, because in some languages, there is no word-to-word translation. And that's why in the book, the second part is the actual vibration of the native language, whether it is Sanskrit, whether it is Hindu, whether it is the Hebrew language, whether it is the Egyptian tones, and I have given those in here as well. So can I just give two examples?
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Hindu text, one of the most powerful Hindu mantras is Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. There is really no single English or French word that each of those sounds translates into. So we can create, a sentence to give meaning, but the actual word Om does not have an equivalent in the English language. So what this mantra is all about, Om is the seed syllable. It is believed to be the primal vibration that set into motion the universe as we know it today. Nama is about the self. It's about honoring and adoring the power of the self. Shivaya is, and you see behind me, to remind me every day, you see a dancing Shiva. In the Hindu traditions, this represents the three deities, the trilogy: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva. And there's controversy around Shiva because if you Google this, you may find that Shiva is called the destroyer. But in the deep understanding of the Hindu traditions, Shiva is the transformer. Sometimes to transform what exists into what is yet to be, what exists must be destroyed. But it is not destruction for the sake of destruction. It is the breakdown of what is not true to give way to something of a deeper truth. So Om Namah Shivaya is a way of honoring that within ourselves, but there are no direct words. So the mantra itself, Om Namah, and when it is sung, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, it's a very, very powerful. I mean, I can feel that right now just from saying that. So that is one aspect of using the original sound. The ideas, I think, honestly, Lilou, one of the most powerful of these is a prayer in the native North American. It is an indigenous tradition that's called Navajo. That is very close. The Navajo land is very close to where I am right now. Beautiful land, high desert, thin air, 3,000 meters above sea level, just beautiful, blue skies. And in the Navajo tradition, the power of beauty is revered as the fifth force in physics. So physics tells us, in Nassim talks about this a lot. When he and I are dear friends, brothers. We're doing research together right now. We talk about this sometimes. The four forces of physics: the electromagnetic force, the gravitational force, the strong and the weak nuclear force. Those are acknowledged. The fifth force, the Navajo say, is the power of beauty. And for them, beauty is more than an aesthetic. It is literally a force. We are changed in the presence of beauty because when we behold beauty, we feel differently in the presence of beauty. That difference changes the chemistry, and we now know the DNA inside of our bodies. So the Navajo have a very long prayer, too long to go into here, to honor beauty, and then they have an abbreviated version that I say to myself almost every day, sometimes multiple days. It is a cornerstone of my life. Beauty has been a cornerstone of my life since I was a kid. So the prayer simply, three very easy lines: the beauty that I live with, the beauty that I live by, the beauty upon which I base my life. The beauty I live with tells us that beauty already exists everywhere. We do not have to create it. The beauty that I live by invites us to seek out the beauty in all things because it's already there. There is something beautiful in everything that we experience. Our job is to find it. Mother Teresa was a master of this, and I talk about that in the book. The beauty upon which I base my life is the invitation to allow the power of beauty to serve us in our lives. And when we begin to approach our difficult relationships, if I'm going to have a difficult phone call with a publisher or with a producer or with a partner in life or with ourselves or with an election or whatever it is that is happening in our lives with a lockdown, it is an invitation to not be defined by the circumstances as they appear, but to find the power and the mastery to define ourselves by the beauty of which exists in all things, and our job is to find that. So I say it to myself in the morning in the shower. I say it on a walk in nature. I hike every day. So those are two examples. One of them is the actual vibration of the word. The second one, beauty, is the significance that we give to our experiences and helping us to find a way to think differently about those experiences.
Thank you. And I would like to go within this interview, before the end of this interview, into a third one that I heard many times in interviews, including with Ram Dass, is I am. I am
Yes.
that I am. Tell us about this one, because it seems to be a very particular one, like very different and special. They're all special, but this one is particularly intriguing. Can you tell us?
So what I'll say, it is, we could do an entire program on this. At the end of the book, I describe two codes that are called power codes. We find these, we find them in a number of indigenous traditions. They are most pronounced in the Judeo-Christian tradition because they were preserved in the original Hebrew language. So I'll make a distinction. This isn't about Jewish faith. It is about the Hebrew language and the codes that were left for us. The Hebrew language is one of the most mysterious. It is called a core or a root language. There were originally 6 root languages: Sanskrit, cuneiform, cuneiform, Hebrew, and Arabic, and 2 others that are no longer used. These were the original languages. And it is a very stable language. We find the texts that are over 2,500 years old, and we look at those today, and they're almost identical, very stable. So in these traditions, what we're told is that the phrase "I am" and the Hebrew way of saying that is actually a code that communicates vibrationally, as well as the meaning that is, and I will, and I am. So, for example, when people say, we typically think when we say "I will," it means I will take out the trash tomorrow morning. It means I'm going to do something later. But in these spiritual traditions, the word "I will," it's not something I'm going to do later. It is something that I'm saying, I will that this be true. In other words, I claim that this be true. And it's a very different use of the word. So when we understand that, and "I am" is the same, we go back and we look in these original traditions without the judgment that so many people have put around these. These were powerful codes that were left to our human family by those who understood them in a time past. And if we can cut through all of the baggage and all of the judgment and go to the wisdom of those who have come before us, that wisdom can serve us in our lives. So the "I am" code, there's been a lot written about the codes, some more accurate than others. It is a declaration of what is true in the present moment, and how that is applied. And when we embrace that declaration in the presence of heart-brain harmony, this is the key. When we harmonize the heart and the brain, it's like saying to the biology, all systems go, all systems are ready, all systems are primed. Because this literally is what happens. When we harmonize the heart and the brain, it harmonizes all of the systems in the body, the metabolic systems, all of the cells come into harmony. There's a frequency, 0.1 hertz, a very low frequency that is created. It's a healing frequency. When we create that, you can think of that as the operating system in the human body, just like the operating system on the computer. The operating system, once it's there, it needs a program to function, but the program works best under the operating system. I am is a program. I will is a program. So when we optimize our operating system, harmonize the heart and the brain, and then we claim our healing, we claim our joy, we claim our life with the I am and the codes that are associated with I am, it is more potent in that heart-brain harmony. And again, I describe it all probably much better in the book. But
yes, and what's wonderful is that we can refer to different, depending on what we're going through, we can go to different chapters. I guess it's not a book that has to be written from cover to cover. And it's very practical. So thank you so much. I feel it's really timely. I feel this book and the codes are timely.
I wrote this as a book. It doesn't need to be read cover to cover. I would recommend reading the introduction because I talk about heart-brain harmony and how to use the codes. But when you're suffering or in times of loss or fear, you don't have time to read the book. You just want to get to the information.
Get to the page, yeah.
So, before we leave, I just want to honor and acknowledge Ariane Editions, Marc Vallée, based in, I believe he's in Quebec, I think is where he is. And he is my publisher for all of my the French book, this version.
Since
French
'89, he was telling me in an interview I did with him this week.
Yeah, Mark and his sister at the time, she has since passed this world. She's helping from the other world. Her name is Martine. Mark and Martine were kind enough to invite me to speak in conferences to the French audience before I even had a book. And they have been, their care, their love, and their support have been with me for a very long time. And they make it possible for me to communicate with my French audience. And some of the most beautiful programs that I've ever done for French audience have been produced through Ariane traditions. So edition. So I just want to acknowledge and thank Mark because I know that he's responsible for that book that you're holding there. It's the first time I've seen it. So thank you, Mark.
It's a wonderful book, and we thank Mark and your wonderful work, Gregg, for all these years, these decades working and connecting and sharing with us this wisdom in a really practical way too. So thank you so much. Many blessings, and if you have loved this interview, please share it passionately all over the web in French and English, in both versions. You can find them under the description of this video. Thank you so much, Gregg, and hopefully I'll see you soon in France when the borders will open and we'll be able to see you in person. For now, thanks to Skype and these wonderful technologies, we can do this interview. Thank you so much.
Lilou, thank you for having me as a guest today. I look forward to our next. Take good care.
Thank you.